26 May 1941, 20:30 hours North Atlantic, west of France. The wind is already screaming when the first engine coughs to life. Salt spray lashes across the flight deck of HMS Ark Royal, stinging eyes, soaking wool and leather. The deck heaves beneath your boots up, then down steel groaning like an exhausted animal. Somewhere below, waves slam against the hull with a hollow, booming crack. The smell of fuel hangs thick in the cold air, sharp and oily, mixing with wet canvas and sweat. Ahead of you, lined up nose to tail under flickering deck lights, sit the aircraft no one here is supposed to believe in anymore. Fairey Swordfish. Biplanes, fabric wings stretched tight over wooden frames, open cockpits, fixed landing gear, machines that look as though they belong in a museum, not on a storm-tossed Atlantic in the third year of a modern mechanized war. The deck crew works fast, shouting into the wind, hands numb as they secure torpedoes under each aircraft's belly. Each torpedo is longer than a man and heavier than sin, slung beneath planes that look barely strong enough to carry themselves. Canvas snaps, engines idle unevenly, radial pistons clattering like loose cutlery in a drawer. One pilot pulls his goggles down and glances toward the black horizon. He knows what's out there. The Bismarck, a battleship so large it has already rewritten the rules of naval warfare. 42,000 tons of armor and steel, 8 15-inch guns capable of hurling shells heavier than cars across the sea. A ship that, only days earlier, had obliterated HMS Hood, the pride of the Royal Navy. In a blast so violent it split the ship in two, and sent over 1,400 men into the freezing Atlantic. The wind howls louder. The sea is rising. This is the moment the Germans will later laugh about. This is the moment no one is supposed to survive. A green flare shoots up. The first Swordfish lurches forward, rolling across the pitching deck, tail lifting, wheels skimming water-slick steel. For a heartbeat it looks like it won't make it. Then the plane drops, vanishing below the deck's edge, before clawing back into view, barely airborne, swallowed almost immediately by darkness and rain. One by one, the others follow. Out there beyond the curtain of weather, German officers are standing watch aboard the Bismarck. The Atlantic wind snaps signal flags. Anti-aircraft crews stamp their feet against the cold, fingers resting on triggers. Radar screens glow faintly in the dim interior. Confidence hangs heavy in the air. They've been running for nearly 3 days. Despite damage to her fuel tanks and the loss of precious oil, Bismarck has held her own. She has outrun cruisers. She has shrugged off shadowing destroyers. She has forced the Royal Navy to scatter nearly every available ship across the North Atlantic in pursuit. And now, as dusk collapses into night, the Germans believe they have survived the worst. When the lookout first reports aircraft, the reaction is not fear, it's disbelief. Biplanes? The word spreads along the deck with a mix of confusion and contempt. Officers lift binoculars, squinting through rain. Against the darkening sky, they see shapes, slow, lumbering silhouettes with double wings, moving at barely more than 100 miles per hour. Relics, obsolete machines that should have been swept aside years ago by monoplane fighters and modern flak systems. The Bismarck is bristling with anti-aircraft guns, 20mm, 37mm, 105mm, capable of throwing walls of steel into the sky. Her fire control systems are state-of-the-art. Her armor is designed to resist plunging shells from heavy bombers. Not this. Laughter ripples through the deck crews. Some gunners relax, confident. Others shake their heads in disbelief. This is what Britain has left? But the sea has a way of humbling certainty. The Swordfish approach low, so low that spray from wave crests splashes their wings. Rain slashes sideways, blurring vision. The planes wobble and dip, engines straining, fabric wings flexing like living things. Inside the open cockpits, pilots are soaked to the skin, faces numb, hands clenched tight around controls vibrating violently in the turbulence. There's no radio chatter now, only wind, engine noise, and the rising thunder of German guns. The first flak bursts bloom in the sky, sharp white flashes tearing holes in the darkness. Tracers streak past, red and green lines snapping by at eye level. You can almost feel the air being ripped apart by near misses. One swordfish shudders as shrapnel punches through fabric, ripping holes that flap wildly. Another staggers as a burst detonates beneath its wing, the plane momentarily dropping before leveling out again. Still, they come on. The Germans adjust their aim, walking fire ahead of the attackers. The Bismarck begins evasive maneuvers, her massive hull turning through the waves, screws churning white water as the helm swings hard over. The Swordfish pilots see it instantly. That turn, that moment, torpedoes drop from their cradles, splashing into the Black Sea with dull, heavy impacts. White wakes streak forward, cutting through waves toward the battleship's broadside. The gunners scream warnings. The helmsman fights the wheel. One torpedo passes harmlessly astern. Another detonates against the armored belt damage, but not fatal. Then one runs true. Too true. It strikes beneath the stern, where armor is thinner. A violent shudder runs through the Bismarck. Deep inside the hull, metal screams. The rudder jerks, then locks jammed hard over. The great ship begins to turn, and she does not stop. As the Swordfish peel away into the storm, engines fading into the dark, the Bismarck circles helplessly. Her fate quietly, irrevocably changing in the black Atlantic night. The turn never straightens out. At first, the helmsman aboard Bismarck thinks it's a delay between wheel and response. Something heavy ships sometimes do in rough seas. He hauls the wheel the other way. Nothing. The massive rudder indicator stays frozen, angled hard to port. The deck tilts again, and again. The battleship begins to describe a slow, widening circle in the dark Atlantic, engines still driving forward, screws biting water, yet accomplishing nothing. Steel groans along the hull as the ship fights itself. Inside the steering compartment, men shout over the din, hands flying across valves and controls, sweat breaking out despite the cold. Rudder control unresponsive. The report moves upward to the ship like a chill. Engine orders change full ahead, half ahead. Alternating screws, desperate attempts to muscle the ship back on course. For a few moments it seems to work. The circle tightens. Hope flares. Then the sea reminds them who is in charge. A wave slams into the stern, hammering the damaged section. Somewhere deep aft, twisted metal grinds. The rudder jams again, worse than before. Now the circle widens uncontrollably, the bow swinging through spray and darkness like a blind animal. On the bridge, Capitan Ernst Lindemann stares into the night, jaw tight. He knows exactly what this means. Speed was Bismarck's armor, now speed and distance. Without it, every British ship within hundreds of miles is converging on their position. The radios crackle. Contact reports. Bearings. Shadows on the horizon. The hunters have heard the sound of blood in the water. Below decks, damage control teams fight to reach the rudder compartment. It's partially flooded, freezing seawater sloshing around their boots. Emergency lighting flickers, throwing warped shadows across bent steel. Tools slip from numb hands. Every attempt to free the rudder fails. Hydraulic pressure is gone. Mechanical backups refuse to move. Some men suggest explosives to blow the rudder free entirely. The idea hangs in the air. It's desperate, risky, but doing nothing is worse. The charges are prepared. Set. Detonated. The explosion echoes to the stern like a hammer strike. For a moment, just a moment, there is silence. Then the reports come in. Rudder still jammed. Now, damaged beyond repair. The truth settles in slowly, then all at once. Bismarck is no longer a battleship on the run. She is a fixed point in the ocean. Outside, the storm begins to ease, as if the sea itself wants a clearer view of what comes next. The clouds break in places, moonlight spilling across whitecaps and steel, and with visibility comes certainty. British destroyers arrive first. Small, fast, vicious shapes slipping in and out of darkness. Radar-guided, engines snarling. They do not try to sink the battleship, not yet. Instead, they harass. Circle, jab, shells whistle overhead. Star shells burst, bathing the Bismarck in harsh white light, exposing her position again and again. Torpedoes slice through the water, forcing evasive maneuvers the ship can barely perform. Every alarm is sounding now. Every man is awake. Anti-aircraft guns depress toward the horizon, firing at shadows. Main batteries swing ponderously, their massive turrets tracking targets too fast, too close. Shells crash into the sea, throwing towering columns of water that rain back down onto the deck. Hours drag by like years. Men brace themselves against railings, exhausted, soaked, ears ringing. Coffee goes untouched. Hands shake not from fear alone, but from fatigue. They know the Royal Navy is not finished. This is only the waiting. Dawn creeps in slowly on 27th May. The sea is iron gray. Smoke drifts low over the water. And on the horizon clear now, unmistakable loom the shapes that mean the end. Battleships. HMS Rodney. HMS King George V. They approach methodically, like executioners taking measured steps. There is no rush. No need. The Bismarck cannot flee. She can only fight. The first salvos thunder out at long range, 15-inch shells tearing through the air with a sound like ripping cloth, magnified 100 times. Water erupts around the German ship, columns rising higher than her superstructure. Then the hits begin. One shell smashes into the forward superstructure, obliterating rangefinders and killing men instantly. Another tears into a turret, jamming it permanently. Fire blooms. Steel twists. The deck becomes a chaos of smoke, flame, and screaming metal. Bismarck fires back. Her guns still speak with terrible power. Shells straddling British ships, sending geysers skyward. But accuracy is gone. Fire control systems are shattered. Communications are fragmenting. Each turret is becoming its own island of resistance. The ship that once terrified the Atlantic is being dismantled piece by piece, and yet she does not sink. Hour after hour she absorbs punishment that would have destroyed anything else afloat. Armor holds. Compartments flood slowly. Men continue to load and fire guns until they are killed, or the weapons are smashed into useless scrap. It becomes clear that this will not be a clean kill. As British shells tear the Bismarck into a burning wreck, another realization spreads quietly among both fleets. One that began the previous night with a torpedo dropped from a canvas-winged biplane. The most modern battleship in the world has been brought here not by overwhelming force, but by something everyone thought no longer mattered. The firing slows, not because the Bismarck has surrendered, but because there is almost nothing left to aim at. Her superstructure is a shattered skeleton. Rangefinders are gone. Antennas hang like torn wire veins against the sky. The forward turrets are silent, smashed and burned out. Their steel faces scarred and blackened. Aft, one turret still tries to answer, firing blind, each shot more defiance than tactic. Smoke pours from the ship in thick, oily columns. Fires burn unchecked, fed by fuel, paint, and shattered interiors. The deck is slick with seawater and blood. Bodies lie where they fell. Some covered hastily with tarps, others left where there was no time. Inside what remains of the bridge, senior officers are either dead or wounded. Orders are passed by shouting, by runners, by instinct. There is no illusion left, now only duty. Capitan Lindemann knows the truth. Before anyone says it aloud, the ship is finished. But Bismarck will not strike her colors. Down below, scuttling charges are prepared. Valves are opened. Seawater begins to pour into compartments that damage control teams had fought all night to keep dry. The men understand what this means. Some work faster. Some pause briefly to steady their hands. Above, British ships close the range. At near point-blank distance, Rodney unleashes salvo after salvo. The concussion is so violent it shakes her own hull, rattling plates and fittings. Shells smash through Bismarck from side to side now, exiting in explosions of steel and flame. Still, the German ship refuses to sink. She settles lower. Lists, burns. Time stretches. Finally, British commanders make the decision no one wanted but everyone expected. The The cruiser Dorsetshire moves in and launches torpedoes at close range. White wicks streak toward the immobile giant, one, then another. Explosions tear through the already ruined hull. Water rushes in uncontrollably. The list increases sharply now. The deck angles steeply, making footing impossible. The order goes out, abandoned ship. Men pour over the sides into the freezing Atlantic. Some leap, some slide. Some are carried by the tilt and fall without meaning to. Life belts inflate. Shouts echo across the water. Smoke drifts low, blurring everything into gray shapes and movement. At 10:39 hours, the Bismarck rolls heavily to port. Her bow lifts. The stern dips. For a moment, impossibly, she seems to hang there, this masterpiece of modern naval engineering, scarred and burning, yet still majestic in her final seconds. Then she slips beneath the surface. The sea closes over her with a roar and a hiss, leaving only wreckage, oil, and struggling men behind. Silence follows. A silence broken only by wind, waves, and realization. Because as the British ships slow, as lifeboats are lowered and survivors pulled from the water, the truth of the last 48 hours settles in quiet, unsettling, impossible to ignore. This battle was not decided by battleships. It was not decided by radar alone, or by overwhelming firepower, or by industrial might. It was decided the moment German commanders looked up into the storm and laughed. The Fairey Swordfish should never have survived that attack. Every rule of modern air warfare said they should have been torn apart. Too slow, too fragile, too exposed. Flying relics in an age of steel and speed. And yet, it was precisely those weaknesses that saved them. Their low-speed, confused fire control systems calibrated for fast aircraft. Their fabric wings absorbed shrapnel that would have shattered rigid metal. Their ability to fly low and steady in brutal weather allowed them to strike where sleek modern planes could not. They did not overpower the Bismarck. They unbalanced her. A single torpedo, delivered by a machine everyone had written off, jammed a rudder no one had adequately protected, and in doing so, it stripped the most feared battleship on Earth of the one thing she needed to live freedom of movement. Everything that followed the night harassment, the dawn execution, the scuttling flowed from that one moment of the storm. Afterward, naval doctrine would change. Armor schemes would be questioned. Air power would move from supporting role to dominant force. Admirals across the world would quietly rewatch the Bismarck's final hours and rethink everything they thought they knew. But for the men who were there, the lesson was simpler and harsher. Wars are not always decided by the strongest weapons. They are often decided by the ones no one is afraid of anymore. Somewhere on the ocean floor, the Bismarck rests, massive, silent, defeated. And above her, history moves on, carrying with it a warning written in oil, fire, and canvas wings. Never laugh at what you do not understand. The sea does not care that the battle is over. Men thrash in the water, boots dragging them down, oil burning their eyes, waves slapping their faces with numbing force. The Atlantic in May is still winter cold. Every second steals strength. Every breath hurts. British sailors lean over rails, throwing lines, lowering boats, hauling limp bodies aboard. Some German survivors collapse the moment their hands touch steel, coughing blackened water and fuel. Others stare upward in shock, as if expecting the sky itself to fire again. There is no cheering, only urgency, because even now, the danger has not fully passed. Reports come in U-boats in the area. Shadows beneath the surface. The Royal Navy cannot linger. Only 114 men are pulled from the water. Over 2,000 went down with the ship. As lifeboats are hoisted and engines turn away, the survivors look back at the empty sea. Nothing marks the grave. No mast, no oil slick large enough to matter. Just waves, closing ranks as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Hours later, aboard British ships, the prisoners are given blankets, tea, cigarettes. Some accept them silently. Others break down. A few ask the same question again and again. What hit us? The answer feels almost cruel. a biplane. Word travels fast, faster than official reports. Sailors tell other sailors. Dock workers hear it from crews coming ashore. By the time the story reaches London, it already sounds like a legend. The mightiest battleship in the world, stopped by canvas and wire. In mess halls and briefing rooms, officers replay the battle again and again, tracing courses on charts, marking the precise moment the Bismarck's fate turned. Not at dawn, under the thunder of battleship guns, but the night before, in rain and darkness, when slow aircraft pressed home. An attack no one expected to matter. Air crews from Ark Royal are summoned, questioned, praised quietly at first. Many of them shrug off the attention. They know how close they came to dying. They know how much luck rode with them through that storm. One pilot admits later that he never saw the torpedo hit. He only knew the plane suddenly felt lighter. Across the channel in Germany, the reaction is very different. The loss of Bismarck hits like a physical blow. Newspapers struggle to explain it without shattering morale. Admirals demand reports. Engineers are called in. Diagrams are drawn, arrows pointing to the stern, to the rudder, to the single vulnerability no one had believed would matter. Questions pile up. Why was the rudder not better protected? Why were aerial torpedo defenses insufficient? Why did anti-aircraft fire fail to stop such slow targets? There are answers. None of them are comforting. The Swordfish, dismissed as obsolete, exploited a blind spot in modern thinking. Designers had assumed speed was the future, that threats would come fast, high, and predictably. No one had planned for something that could loiter, creep, and strike patiently in the worst weather imaginable. It was not technological superiority that won the night. It was adaptability. For months afterward, German surface fleets rarely venture far without air cover, and even then, caution dominates every decision. The ocean feels smaller now, more dangerous, less forgiving. The psychological shift is profound. Capital ships, once symbols of invincibility, are suddenly exposed, vulnerable to aircraft launched from platforms smaller than the ships themselves. Vulnerable to crews flying machines built before the war began. Quietly, doctrines change. Budgets follow. The era of the battleship begins its long, irreversible decline, not because of one sinking alone, but because of what that sinking proved. That power without protection is an illusion. That size can become a liability, and that wars are often decided not by what is newest, but by what is used in ways no one anticipated. Yet even this is not the full lesson, because what haunted many of the men involved was not the destruction, but the moment before it, that instant of laughter, that flash of confidence, the belief that some threats no longer mattered. History has a way of punishing that belief. Long after the guns fall silent, the night over the Atlantic keeps replaying itself in the minds of those who survived it. In British ready rooms, pilots sit on benches, still wearing flight jackets, stiff with salt and rain. No one is talking loudly. The adrenaline has drained away, leaving only exhaustion and disbelief. They light cigarettes with shaking hands, replaying fragments of the attack. Flak bursts too close, tracer fire whipping past cockpits, the sudden lurch as torpedoes dropped free. Some laugh, softly. Not because it was funny, but because they're still alive. Across the Royal Navy, senior officers gather around charts, pencils scratching notes into margins already crowded with arrows and times. The conclusions forming are uncomfortable, even dangerous to tradition. If Bismarck can be neutralized by aircraft like these, then no battleship is safe. For decades, naval power had been measured in gun caliber, armor thickness, displacement. Bigger meant stronger, heavier meant safer. The ocean had belonged to those who could build the largest floating fortresses and point them in the right direction. That belief died in a storm. The Swordfish were never meant to be the future. They were placeholders, machines kept in service because replacements were slow to arrive. Their crews joked about flying antiques. Their designers never imagined they would decide the fate of the most advanced battleship afloat. And yet, when weather grounded faster, sleeker aircraft, the Swordfish still flew. When radar-guided flak expected speed, they brought patience. When everyone else waited for daylight, they attacked at night. This is the part that quietly terrifies planners. Not that Britain had better technology, but that it used what it had without waiting for perfect conditions. The implications ripple outward. In the Pacific, Japanese officers studying the reports draw their own conclusions, ones that will soon be tested in places like Pearl Harbor and the Coral Sea. In the United States, observers take careful note of how a carrier-launched strike, even with outdated planes, can cripple capital ships far beyond gun range. The carrier deck begins to replace the battleship's turret as the center of naval strategy. Not overnight, not without resistance, but inevitably, even among the Germans, the lesson is unmistakable. Surface raiders become rarer. Missions grow more cautious. The ocean, once seen as open hunting ground, becomes a killing zone controlled increasingly by aircraft, unseen until it's too late. And at the center of it all sits one image, a massive battleship circling helplessly in gray seas, while fragile aircraft disappear into the storm. What makes this moment endure is not just the scale of the loss, but how wrong everyone was beforehand. Experts had calculated armor penetration down to millimeters. They had debated shell trajectories and range-finding accuracy. They had assumed the future would be clean, fast, and predictable. They did not account for improvisation. They did not account for weather. They did not account for men willing to climb into obsolete machines and fly straight into flak because no one else could. That is what history remembers. Not the specifications, but the choices. Because when the Atlantic storm closed in, technology alone did not decide the outcome. People did. And this realization, quiet, uncomfortable, undeniable, will echo into every naval engagement that follows. From convoy battles to carrier duels, from the Arctic to the Pacific, the shadow of the Swordfish attack stretches far beyond that single night. The mighty had been humbled. The obsolete had proven lethal. And the world's navies would never look at the sky the same way again. Years later, the ocean above the Bismarck looks no different than it did before she ever sailed. Gray, endless, indifferent. Her wreck lies more than 4 kilometers down, broken in places, intact in others. A massive shadow pressed into the seabed. The guns still point outward. The hull still carries the lines of power and confidence that once made admirals believe she was untouchable. But history remembers her not for how she was built, only for how she was stopped. Because when the story is stripped to its core, this was never just about a battleship. It was about belief. Belief in size. Belief in armor. Belief that progress moves in straight lines. The German command believed the Swordfish were irrelevant because they belonged to the past. Slow. Exposed. Ridiculous in the face of modern steel, that belief shaped how they watched the sky, how they prioritized threats, how they reacted when the wrong kind of aircraft emerged from the storm. And in war, belief can be fatal. The pilots of the Swordfish did not fly thinking they were about to rewrite naval history. They flew because they were ordered to, because someone had to try, because failure was already assumed, and that strangely made success possible. They did not defeat the Bismarck by destroying her outright. They defeated her by taking away her choice. A ship that cannot maneuver is no longer a weapon. It is a target. From that moment on, everything else was inevitable. The destroyers in the night, the battleships at dawn, the scuttling charges, the final roll into the sea, all of it traced back to one torpedo dropped from an aircraft everyone had already dismissed. And that is why this story endures. Not because of the spectacle, but because of the warning it carries. Wars are filled with moments where one side laughs and the other side adapts, where doctrine blinds experience, where confidence replaces caution, where the past returns not as nostalgia, but as a weapon. The Fairey Swordfish did not end the era of the battleship by itself. But on that stormy night in May 1941, it cracked the illusion that power could no longer be challenged by the unexpected. And once an illusion breaks, it never fully returns. Somewhere above the wreck, waves roll on, unaware of the lesson beneath them. But history remembers.